Like they started adding new features over features over features over features.
Like
Could
what?
I don't know. Well,
Exactly.
look on
Like
the web. No, but if you look on the
no,
website, it
what I'm
feels like
what I'm saying is that it doesn't feel like they added anything.
I know.
Like
But if you look at
it
the website, it feels like they added a ton.
no, it doesn't. If you can name me a feature that they added that is like substantial, then yeah.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 6. We're going to be talking about Framer, my learning curve using Framer to build our own site, which should be live by the time you're listening to this podcast. So make sure to go and have a look. Our friendly competition is about to kick off where we put Mitch against myself, and you get to be the judge of who's better at design, copywriting, and so on. Friendly competition, but hey, it's a competition we all want to win. We're going to be discussing interview skills, techniques. Mitch is going to walk us through his process and procedures where he puts psychology into the mix, personality into the mix. You don't want to miss this part because I think it's going to help you differentiate yourself from others. We talk about design challenges and how companies often ask design challenges. I'm not a fan of this. Mitch has his perspective on this. You don't want to miss this. Go have a look. See you on the other side. Just want to start off by saying I just got a new mic. Hopefully it sounds way
That's
better,
right. That's
right?
right. The
New
mic's
mic,
better.
way better. Next,
So so let me get this straight. So now you have your mic
yeah,
and your Opal camera,
yeah.
and then I guess you have to develop the background a little bit in the lighting, and
I
then
have
you'll
to
be
figure out
set.
the lighting because the office is right beside a huge window. I can't hide that. So it's something I have to figure out. But I think we can I'll figure out with lighting once I get it up to balance the light. I'll have the background set up very soon. Slow step, not moving at your pace with this, but you know what? Me being in this Mexican country, it just makes it a bit harder. So one thing at a time, we'll get there. But Mike is there. First step to anything.
Cool. Yeah, for me, I'm very much a person who likes to just get it done, rip the Band-Aid off. And I don't like waiting. I guess I'm becoming more and more impatient, which is I
I
guess to
know.
our advantage, something that I'm using at least for our, primitives
Yep.
initiative. So part of that initiative, why don't we start talking about a couple of things we're going to be going over?
Yep.
First thing is this framer competition that we kind of want to discuss, framer contest, however you want to frame it. Haha, see that joke
Framer.
I threw in there? Yeah. So
No
for
pun
those who don't
intended.
know, Framer is a tool that we
Yeah.
use to design websites, and it's a really cool drag and drop, WYSIWYG, GUI tool. We really enjoy using it. Pascal, why don't you talk about a little bit about your experience using it? Because you've been setting up our primitives, our learnprimitives.com website
Mhm.
that by the time this episode airs, that should probably be up.
Yeah. It's been a fun, interesting ride. I spent the last 2.5 weeks playing with the framer, and I think it's interesting. It's the learning curve is somewhat easy, I would say. I'm still figuring out. There's a bunch of things I want to be able to do, but I can't figure it out. I don't know how to do it. And I, there's not that many tutorials out there yet. There are a lot of tutorials on the basic foundational stuff with it, but if you want to do a bit more crazier animations or scroll elements, they're not always there. So I know a lot of people are very strong with Framer. They just haven't had a chance, obviously, to do all those tutorials, but it's a very fun tool. Once you get the hang of it, it's pretty cool. And I think it's going to start to simplify a lot of the for a lot of the people that want to create their own site, don't want to code, don't want to do many of those things. I think it's going to simplify a lot of these things, and it allows people to just concentrate and not have to worry about many different things. And it's pretty customizable and pretty flexible, so that's cool. And there's a lot of people that did pretty amazing sites with it. So we'll see. We'll get ours up there, and then we'll launch V2 after that.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for actually setting that up because I know it's a pretty big endeavor to learn a new tool and then actually publish something that hopefully will start making us money, right? So,
Mhm.
we do talk about what we're doing in public, building in public, and we're trying to soon launch this website that hosts some of our courses that we're going to be launching soon. You'll
Yep.
be able to purchase the course ahead of time for a lower price. And then, by the time it actually launches, then the price will go up. So be sure to get in soon. And that first course that we're teaching is about creating portfolios. And of course, we're doing
Mhm.
a live cohort for free,
Mhm.
but there's limited seats to that. And then once we finish that, we'll take what we learned from that and then be able to apply that to this course
Yeah.
that you can purchase on demand and listen and watch whenever you want from wherever you want.
And there's another reason that framers use, right? Is for this contest thing that we want to do.
That's right. So, this contest that we're talking about, we mentioned it in a previous episode, but just to recap, Pascal and I are debating who's the better web designer, right?
That's not the real reason.
I
No,
mean,
no, no, that
that's like legit the real reason, but the real reason we tell people is that we want to help build this brand primitives, and we think that one really cool thing we can do to help get some of the audience eyes on us is by creating this a little bit tension building startups, one startup every week. So this initiative, we're calling it One Startup One Week. I just bought the domain, so you can go to that onestartuponeweek.com, and you'll be able to see side-by-side comparisons of ideas that Pascal and I are working on and who would actually execute that idea for a startup better. So the idea of this entire concept is each of us, Pascal and I, are going to be competing for 1 week at a time, creating a landing page for a startup idea. And you'll be able to vote who created the better website for each one. There's a grading scale that we have that we're going to be using based on our previous kind of framework, which would be including presentation, story, and personality, and then whatever else kind of comes in with that. And you get to vote, and maybe if you guys like it enough, we'll actually build those things. So just kind of testing the waters there. So it's kind of like a multi-part thing. We get to learn how to use Framer and be able to even create templates for all of you. So you can create your own websites. We have fun doing it, getting a new skill, but also we can even use this as something we want to teach in the future, or even help use for other things that we're working on that we can't quite say just yet. But there's a lot of fun things coming with this whole Framer initiative that we're working on. So
yeah.
onestartuponeweek.com is where you can find more information about all of this.
It's also a great way to build in public, right? And not
Hmm.
to be shy to share. I think everybody's learning, and especially with this software, it's okay to share and learn progress as we move forward. And hopefully, it's gonna spice up the creativity and challenge in all this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you and I were so one thing that I think we lack is like marketing skills because we're so in depth with the product. Like, so for those who don't actually know by not doing it, if you're usually working on an interface for a product, like active daily use of a product, onboarding, whatever, you're not necessarily focused on how to present that to others and communicate that to others in a marketing essence. And those things, marketing and product, kind of are not opposites, but they don't really sit in the same playing field, especially when you're designing. So for us, this would be kind of a great way to kind of oil the wheels a little bit
Mhm.
and get that part of our skill sets up and going, and hopefully be able to even help others design their landing pages and stuff. So we have some courses we have in the works potentially. If those who are listening want to hear more about that eventually, course on maybe creating a great landing page, course on using no code tools, and so forth. And I'm experimenting not just with Framer as well, Pascal. I forgot to tell you, I'm working on other tools just to kind of see what's out there. But we'll review those in the future.
No, that's great. No, I think it's a great opportunity. And the the other thing I wanted to transition was I want to transition into interviewing a bit. Let me explain a bit more on all that.
Okay.
A lot of people have been interviewing lately. There's many theories on what's the best framework for interviewing. We all know, the secret to a UX interview requires you to successfully, I should say, present four things about yourself, right? Skills. Do you have the necessary skills to perform the job? Research, design, coding, usability, whatever. Experience. Do you have the right experience, leadership, domain expertise for the role that you're applying with? Likability. How do you handle stressful situations? Fit. How do you fit into the current group? Are you a cultural fit? Different companies look for different things. So those are all things that typically the researcher, whoever you're having a conversation with, is gonna, start to ask. then, the one thing I was taught, at least pretty solidly, because I didn't do that before, was talk to in your interview, use self. Like I led a team. I created this project and co-led with XYZ. Those are all things that, I always did. And I think they've always been very useful, be myself, lead with I, because as y'all know, when you're in a company and you present, it's like we did this, the team and I did this. It's never like I myself. But when you're in an interview, it's all about yourself. Even if you're a leader, it's like I led the team to increase NPS score by 20% or whatever. Like I think it's all about that part. But one thing that Mitch and I have been talking about and was, could there be a better way or a better framework? Framework is going to be used loosely here, but more of like a situational aspect that could help people get ahead of the games. Are there tips and tactics that could get them ahead of the game? And the reason we wanted to put this together is Mitch has been having some conversations lately and wanted to provide his perspective on it and see what he's been doing and how it's been going basically for that.
Well, it's been going really well, but I think that for a long time, I was thinking that just being authentically myself, we've discussed this in the past, being authentically myself isn't enough. I think that that's going to take you only so far. And so I was searching for a lot of different strategies, if you will, for how to best interview, how to best be the best candidate. So for a while, I didn't really know how best to strategize these interviews because for me, I didn't have anyone teach me how to strategize, or I really didn't trust other people's strategies online because I think that they're more kind of BS, to be honest. I've tried some in the past, and I just don't think they work very well. I think there's some things that can marginally improve your chances. What are the things that are going to improve your chances by the most, have the highest impact on getting you to close on that deal with the interviewer or whoever is interviewing you, the hiring manager, the recruiter, or whatever? A friend of mine recommended me a book called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. And it's a really good book. I don't think every single thing in the book actually applies, but I do think that it's enough to like get you somewhere that maybe you've been struggling to get to.
Can you provide some examples?
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of look at the interview process from three phases: listening, positioning, and then negotiating, and each one leads to the next. Not that you wouldn't listen throughout the whole procedure, but you definitely want to listen the most in the beginning because you want to be able to cover your ground. You want to be able to really understand where everything sits on the other person's perspective, and then you can make your decisions. And that will actually help impact you positively later on. You don't want to overstep in the wrong direction. So this book kind of gives you a lot of strategies, really good strategies that also don't just apply to interviewing, but also negotiating in anything, in relationships, in friendships, in business, in whatever. So a couple of the lessons that I'm going to pull out have a lot to do with negotiations, but they apply significantly to interviewing. And this is what I've been using recently. And I think that they've actually been pretty successful. And I don't think that necessarily every single thing, if you miss one thing in here, or you miss a couple of these things, or you don't do it really well, you can't save the interview. Of course you can. Be authentically yourself for sure. It's just not always the best thing that's going to take you the farthest. It can definitely save you in some cases, but I'm going to give you some skills right from this book that I've been using that I think have been working pretty well. So, number one, the book kind of goes into one of these things called listening, but it's I guess some people call it active listening or whatever. It sounds, I don't know, very like rudimentary, like everyone kind of already understands. Okay, listen, yeah, okay, they said this and whatever. But if you start by listening and you make it about the other person a little bit, they kind of, for one, love talking about themselves. They really love to explain their thought process because if you've shown interest in them, they're going to reflect that back to you. Of course, they're the one hiring you, so they're very interested in you. But if you're going to go in it listening to them, and listening to their problems, you're going to act more like a problem solver for them they're looking for, right? So that's what they're kind of asking you to do. They're hiring you to fulfill a specific role, a specific task, or set of tasks. And sometimes, and mostly, they'll ask you to kind of do this autonomously. So they don't really want to be over your shoulder looking at you. They want to make sure you can do this yourself. But if you're asking the questions about them and getting personal with them, then listening to what they have to say, what their kind of pain points are, and we'll get into this in a little bit. For example, I'll give you an example that'll help illustrate this. Like, wow, this is a really exciting role, but why hasn't it been filled yet? Kind of listen to what they have to say about that kind of stuff, or comment on something in the room, maybe something that like might be association, like, oh, I can tell you're this kind of you're a plant lover or something. Tell me more about that plant you have in the back, and build that relationship by listening, and to not just looking around the room, but listening to what they actually do have to say, listening to their body language, paying attention. Really listening really means paying attention. So they're going to say a lot of stuff. Sometimes their body language says something different. So listen to both of those things. But being able to listen and catch those little like idiosyncrasies that might not be something you hear in other interviews can actually save you later on. And we'll go into those in a minute, because by listening, you actually can do something really cool called mirroring. So Pascal, have you heard of what mirroring is?
Yes, but I'm going to let you explain it.
Okay. So mirroring is great because it makes them feel like you're listening. Like, of course, you can listen and ask questions, but are you actually digesting information they're giving you that they think is really important? One way to do that and make them feel like you actually are and truly doing it yourself is by, in a sense, repeating it back to them, right? So one example of this might be if they're telling you, hey, this role includes certain things, you're going to repeat that back to them. And they go, oh, yeah, you get it. And you can paraphrase it a little bit. So you don't have to repeat every single word, because God forbid, you have to actually memorize what they're saying. Don't memorize what they're saying. But if you repeat back what they say, it actually helps them realize, okay, this person is listening to me. They're not just looking at me, staring at me, and nodding their head. No one wants a yes person, right?
And I think those are things that apply not just to that part, but to like a lot of the roles that you could be doing. Like even if you're leading people or having a conversation with a project manager, those are all things that could also help in that aspect as well.
Yeah, it also could be used in a certain way where you're also facing the same problems. So not just saying what they're saying, but also feeling the same feeling. So, if you say something like, so what did the other candidates have that did not have that you're looking for? And, you can fill that void by saying, funny, I was facing the same problem when I was working for, Billy Bo over there. So I totally get how you're feeling. Reflect what they're feeling, what they're saying back to them, and they'll feel more of a personal connection to you because you're saying that you're in the same boat as them, essentially. And they like that. It makes them feel comfortable, right? And everyone wants to feel comfortable when they're talking to somebody. You don't want to be very like, oh yeah, oh totally, yeah, I get you. Like, calm down. First of all, calm down. But secondly, by acknowledging something, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're actually listening. So by replying back and mirroring, you're actually repeating words that they said. As you say it, it helps you memorize them a little bit too. It actually helps you digest them more too. So that's what I actually do a lot. I do it subconsciously, but it turns out it is something that people do feel a lot better when you do it. So mirroring, that's number 2. Number 3 is kind of hard to explain, and I'm not very good at explaining this one, but tactical empathy. Empathy is definitely different than sympathy. I'm not going to explain what empathy and sympathy are, but you definitely have to sit down and get on that person's level, right? So the last couple examples and the last couple of points I was trying to make, listening and mirroring, those are strategies to get closer to empathizing with somebody, because you can't empathize with somebody if you don't listen to them, you don't hear their perspective, and you can't really empathize with them if they don't actually feel that you're listening to them. So I guess mirroring would be the action of acknowledging you're listening, and listening is the gateway in order to empathize. And so tactical empathy in this case, it brings attention to both the emotional obstacles and, things like avenues in which you can kind of use to your advantage to get the role. So, you got to realize from their perspective, how do they feel? And, you know, acknowledge that the hunt for, like, for example, for a candidate is actually difficult. Like, because it is, like, you have to go through, like, so many interviews with somebody just to find one person that might fit the role, and then you hope that they actually do, and then if they don't, then, you're gonna be really upset with yourself, and you're gonna go back and try to ask them whatever. So,
It's also very costly. I think
it's
that's
very costly.
that's an issue why they take so much time to
It's high stakes.
it's high stakes, especially like depending on the role and like the hierarchy level, it takes a long research time and it's very costly to bring new people in.
Mhm. Yeah. By empathizing, though, you can get, again, closer to that person. The
Yeah.
whole goal is to build trust with this interviewer, right? And to prove that you're trustworthy, but also that you're the one for the job. And it would match all the different things that you listed before, Pascal. But being able to build that empathy is essential. Because if you don't have empathy, you're actually in a really bad spot. If you don't have empathy with that interviewer or show some sort of empathy, they're going to think automatically the opposite, that you're treating them just like a number. Because in a sense, you kind of are, right? There's a bunch of people you're probably interviewing with. Hopefully you're not interviewing with just one company at a time. And like, that's kind of hard to do, at least on the person. It's easy for the company because they have the advantage. But, if you're using empathy, it'll take you a lot farther even when you get the job. Like, what happens when, you have take off really quick right when you get the job. Some people will be really mad if you take off as soon as you get hired because you have to go to a wedding or whatever. But if you build the empathy, you can explain these things in a different manner and have a little bit more cushion for long term. It's a long term strategy game. You don't want to go in without empathy. So that's what I'll say about that. And point number 4, you have to label their emotions. So a lot of these things that I've been kind of pulling out, they're all kind of stacking on each other. If you notice, they're except the last one. The last one's a little bit different, but they all kind of tie together and they are kind of related. And this one goes back to the emotion because a lot of people make decisions based on emotions, and you want to make sure that you have your emotions in line. Never go out of line with your emotions, even if something goes wrong from your perspective. Just keep your emotions in line and then be able to peacefully depart. But if you're really trying to get this job, keeping your emotions in line is as important as keeping their emotions in line and listening to them. If you can label their emotions, then you give more satisfaction to them because then again it builds further empathy that you're understanding and listening. You see how all this stuff is starting to play out and kind of build on top of each other? So labeling their emotions, like, I bet it's frustrating. You keep, interviewing candidates, but haven't found the right one. That must be really time consuming. And then they're going to be like, oh my gosh, yeah, you totally get me. Like, yeah, it's been like months since we can find someone to replace, you know, that last person who just, totally blew us off. Like, just now we're in a terrible position. It's like, oh, cool. I can now fill that void for you. I can help fit, fit that the area where you don't have to have any more of that pain from trying to look for somebody. So I think if you label your emotions or label their emotions, they're more likely to have even further empathy with you. You're able to build that relationship further
Yep.
and then make you seem more likable, like you said. And the fifth kind of point doesn't actually relate necessarily to all the others. It can be benefited by the other points, but it's sometimes on its own. And it's this idea of the word no, and I love this. And I'll give you a story about this before I kind of dive into it in more description. So I was at this store called Zara buying some clothing or returning it. I don't quite remember. I was in line and I was waiting at the cashier, and somebody else next to me was at another cashier purchasing like a bunch of shirts. This guy, he had a really thick accent. He was tall. He had his shirt buttoned up or buttoned down all the way. You can see his like chest hair and stuff, and he looked like he was having a good time, right? Like he was like basically coming from the beach almost, but in the middle of Austin, Texas, is not really a beach. Anyways, this guy, he was essentially he really wanted to buy a bunch of hangers from the store, but they don't sell the hangers. He's like, how much for the hangers? And the cashier's like, oh, sorry, man, sorry, sir, we can't sell you those. He goes, how much? She goes, we can't sell them. And so she kept saying no, and I can't give you this. And he actually went out of his way. And he was just like, all right, how about I just buy 10 of these? You give me 10 of these, I'll buy all of them. And she's like, no. And he's like, well, how about 8? She's like, no. 5? No. 3. Come on, let me buy 3. 300 for 3. $100 for each one. 3, please, come on. He persisted so much. She looked at him, looked at the cashier, looked at me, and then she turned to him and said, all right, I'll give you these 3 for free. And they don't want to give out the hangers because these are very, like, I guess, nice hangers that they use in the store. And she's like,
Mhm.
no, sir, like I have to, rehang other clothing. We can't
Yeah.
have these. But after like 15 minutes of him saying, I'm not taking no for an answer, she was able to kind of be whittled down to like at least give him something, right? It wasn't the exact number he wanted. Maybe he didn't want that number.
Mm.
And we can talk about that in a little bit because I know I have some other tips as well. And that we call ballparking. But no is a gateway to yes. And you just have to figure out how to reword it and reframe the whole situation. So if somebody says no, it's not no, end of discussion. It's not yet. You haven't presented to me something that's so valuable that
You
I'm willing to get off this word no.
Yeah, it basically means there's a better yes somewhere.
Exactly. There's a better yes somewhere else. And you have to find that, right? So I mentioned something else in there called ballparking. And do you want to explain what this is?
When you turn like in terms of negotiation, like salary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people approach this part differently. Like I tend to ask for the entire package. Kind of explain that. Kind of been talking to people. I know the
Okay, well,
salary range.
let's time out right there. Let's start that one over. So like, would you be able to explain what ballparking means and then kind of go into your strategy about it?
Well, for me, ballparking is providing, and I may be wrong because I maybe don't have the same one you're thinking of, but ballparking for me is providing a range of numbers within, within the industry norms. That's basically for me, that's what I consider ballparking. And then you can explain how
Yeah,
you
yeah.
see it.
It's kind of like ballparking is that you give it kind of like an area in which you're not being so specific.
Yeah.
But in this case, I'm kind of using it as a way to like highball the number that they might be giving you. So if they ask you, well, what's your number? If you ever are in a position where you can't ask them to give you a number first, then you would kind of start at the highest number you possibly could and work your way down to the number you actually want. So you
Yeah,
kind of
but wouldn't that be then how would you know what the highest number is?
you don't. That's the problem. But the good part about it is you are trying to get them to a number you really want. You start with your number and then you go higher than your number. They go, that's outrageous. How about this? And then their response to you is that they're going to give you a lower number than you said. That's actually the number you really want. So if you just
Yeah.
say you want like $100,000 and you say, I want like $140,000 salary, and they go, no, we can't do that. Not for that level. How about 110? You've already beat your number, right? So whenever they say no, then you can go in and say, okay, how about a little bit more? So that's what I did for a couple of other roles, and it worked out pretty well. So you can kind of give a ballpark range too, and I know you have a strategy for this specifically, and I really like your strategy too because you're not saying, and I'll let you go into, it, but you're not saying necessarily here's the number. You're coming with evidence. You're coming with data.
Yeah, I usually because I used to really lowball, and I got caught a couple of times like going too low. But I guess for me, it's more about coming at it with, I know what the industry numbers are. I've had conversations with others. I know my fair value in the market. I'd love to see the package before I'm able to provide some numbers, and then what I've been lucky with so far, they tend to kind of give you you know, level seniority X is between X and X. Based on your salary, you'd kind of be positioned within this area. And those are the kind of what I've been doing.
Mhm.
I haven't always succeeded doing that, though. I have to say, like in some situations, I got lowballed. This situation, I got okay. But it's a senior leader that's told me that one at one point where if you force them to kind of give you the number, you kind of tell them you know your value in the industry, they're going to come at it and provide you their range rather than you giving them their range. So I've applied it in numerous times, and maybe it's time to revisit, but it's what I've been doing. It's it's been working so.
Yeah, I think that it also changes over time, and also for each person individually, each situation can be different. Like, sometimes you're not prepared for what they're gonna ask you. But, this kinda goes back to the whole listening, negotiating, excuse me, listening, positioning, and then negotiating. So, that's kind of how all interviews work. You kind of introduce
Mm.
yourself, you go through, like, a process of, like, providing your value, and if they like you, right? So that's like the positioning phase, and then you kinda negotiate the end of, like, what value you're gonna get back in return. So, those are the points from the book. There's actually many more. I highly recommend checking it out. Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss.
And I think it's something that people can, prototype and test
Yeah.
because like it practice makes perfect. It's that thing that we don't tend to practice enough of.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to wrap those points up with that I kind of skipped over a little bit in the beginning. The very first one I was kind of saying was listening. One thing that's really important when you are listening, and this applies to everything, you have to really understand the other person's worldview. And that will end up also changing how you ballpark or how you kind of go into the negotiation phase with the salaries and the value in return, the whole equity package or whatever it's called. You have to understand, and I think this might be the most important lesson of all. You have to understand how emotional or logical is this person. There's like three types of people. A previous manager of mine, maybe we can get on the podcast soon, who kind of taught me how to like read people to better work with them. He said, there's people who are very logical, emotional, and then kind of a mixture of both. But oftentimes you're going to run into the people who are more logical or emotional on one side or the other. And when you understand how somebody reacts to things and thinks and digests information first, either emotionally or logically, you can better position your answer for them. So they ask you a question. If you answer a logical person with emotions, they're not going to receive it well. They're not going to really accept that answer very well. They're going to kind of reject that. So if somebody is, for example, I'll give you a life example that I've worked with somebody in the past who was a very logical thinker. And in this particular case, I had to present an argument to implement a design that he did not want. And the only way I can do it is by providing the reasoning why this would be more successful than his potential solution. And in that case, the reasoning that I had actually encompassed what he was saying. So it ended up working out for me where the solution was taken and then implemented across the company. But it's kind of hard to talk about it in abstract form. But if you're talking about something that's more emotional and somebody's asking you to respond, you have to respond emotionally, not like, "Oh my god," but like you have to you have to get into their emotions and understand, like, with the empathy, like, "Yeah, no, I get you're totally frustrated with that, and that was totally, terrible of them." And maybe, like, what this person's saying to you is wrong, but what you have to say back to them is that you neutrally empathize with them. Maybe you don't agree or disagree. Maybe you agree or disagree, but you can say, "Oh, I see how frustrating or painful that was for you that you didn't get that salary," or "I know it's upsetting that your idea was turned down even though you worked all night on it." Right? Better luck next time. But maybe in a better sense, you can say, let's work together on a better solution that will actually improve both parties. So you have to understand where they're coming from to then know how to communicate back to them and respond to them. And I think that applies for everything.
Yeah, interesting. Another thing I since we're on this topic is like the takeaway exams or the whiteboard sessions. I
I'm very
person
emotional about those.
I'm personally not a fan
Mhm.
of that solve the
Design
world in
design
30.
exercises, right?
Well, some I don't mind the takeaway exam at home because you got time to think. You like and it respects everybody's pace and everybody's personality and style.
Okay.
The solve the world in 2 minutes on a whiteboard, I know a lot of people freeze at those situations, and some people who are excellent at what they do are not going to be portrayed as good in that type of exercise, and it takes away from that. I don't think
Mhm.
my personal opinion is I don't think it's an inclusive design exercise. Many are going to argue it just shows the way you think, or how you articulate a problem. How I totally understand that aspect of it. I'm just thinking that I've worked with a lot of people that don't behave nicely when they're put into this stressful situation for 30 seconds, but they're excellent if they have time to go at their desk and think about it and come back and they have an excellent solution. So I think it forces everybody to get into like this fit model of everybody has to fit within our realm and not be respectful of. So that's like for the whiteboard takeaway exam. It's okay. I'd prefer if they're paid, in all opinion, because at the end of the day, they're going to get many free exercise at home and they didn't pay for it. So
Yeah.
I think that's my 2 cents. You?
Okay. I have a lot of opinions about this, and I think I'll start with number one. You know what these like design exercises sound like? They sound a lot like to me like, when I say jump, you jump. Or what is it? Like when I say jump, you say how high, right? I don't like that. It kind of begins to put you in a mindset of like you're obedient to that kind of person or company. Of course, you have to be respectful and you have to do what they say because they're paying you, but only to a certain degree. And you're not actually working for them yet. You're testing the waters. I think some people will get like upset and they go, well, this is like just the real world and you have to do things you don't like and you don't want to do and da, 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 da." And I think that's fine, but this time that I'm spending on an exercise, a take home exercise or in person or a whiteboard session virtually, whatever they are, I'm giving my knowledge to somebody and I don't know what they're going to do with it. If they do like one of those like imaginary ones, like what Shopify or Stripe, or I don't know if Stripe does it, but I know Facebook does it, right? Um, Shopify is a really not Shop was it? Yeah, Shopify was a really good example because they have one that's not necessarily about work that they do. It's I think the exercise is create a clock with like one button, and you have to have all these different functions with the one button. And it's cool, like, I think it's fine. That's, like, a fun thing to talk about and, whatever, you see the way you think. I don't really know how much you can get out of that because you can say, "Okay, this is how somebody thinks," right? But how somebody thinks, in my opinion, is better sought out over time. And you can have, like, eureka moments over time, not necessarily in the you can't always force that eureka moment. And maybe your idea sucks today, right? Maybe you need time to think about it. Maybe you need to experiment and you're not good at like just talking and whiteboarding about it. Maybe you want to build something and test it out. I don't think the same mode of interaction communicating about the exercise actually informs the other person about how smart you are. I think it
Exactly. And
actually
like
inhibits it.
that's the point. I feel like some are going to behave excessively well on that exercise. Others are going to look like they don't know what they're doing and they can't think because they're
Mhm.
forced to think and they like their brain doesn't compute in that way. So I think they're limiting themselves. They're limiting the types of candidates they can get by forcing them to
Well,
fail. I don't know.
so
I'm not on the receiving end on that, so I don't know if it's a fail or pass or it's just like part of the total package to see. But I still think it. it's not the best way to evaluate a lot of this.
But you know what a better way to evaluate is to actually have somebody work for you for a certain period of time in like maybe like some sort of contract role instead of full time. Like maybe every full time role for like a design job is like, all right, we'll hire you for 3 months. If it all goes well, then you'll get the rest of the stuff. If not, then you would just work for us for the 3 months and then you can leave if you want. If you didn't like it, you can look for a new job. We'll give you like another month stipend or salary just so that you can, look for your next job. Um, but I think that might be more appropriate, even though it's more time consuming, it's literally times 3 months. You get a couple benefits out of that, like number one, you get to actually see the culture and see if you really are a fit. Sometimes the work is fine, but like the people that you're working with are not. So you don't know that until you actually have to work with them and then you see the problems there, right? So that's number one.
It's
Number
also like
two,
it kind of, when you're doing that interview, you're also interviewing them as much as they are you. And it should
yes.
also be like the same thing when you're starting. You should be testing out the waters as much as they are testing you. I think I like that approach. It's just, it should be a two-way thing, and it should be
Mhm.
understood from the start that we're both testing the waters here.
Yeah, and if you don't have the portfolio to prove that you can do this stuff and they're kind of unsure, that's already kind of maybe a red flag, right? Sometimes, you sacrifice talent, like skill talent, for like conviction. If you are really you have like strong conviction about like you really want to work this company, you'll do anything you can, you whatever, 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 and you express that, sometimes they'll put that over having a great composite of skills because you can build those over time, maybe not as fast as they like, but you probably could, and they can probably help you out with that. So I think that sometimes it's up to that company to decide what are they looking for, what stage, because if they can grow the designer, they can grow the person, or they want the person already grown up and then like potty trained, and then they can like they can then use them to what they're aiming for. So it all depends on really what the company is looking for and what you're looking for too, right? If you're a designer and you want a specific kind of role, projects, company, resume piece, whatever, portfolio piece, whatever it is, you have to take these into consideration. There's no right or wrong answer, but it's what are you going to put into it and get out of it. And you have to know this. You have to figure this out. This is not something that you can just keep passively doing over time. Otherwise, you're just going to rot away and just keep doing, work for people that you may not actually like. If you start targeting things better, if you start thinking about the future and start planning these, strategically, just like one of our other episodes about, where do you start as a designer, right? We talked about agency, we talked about startup, talked about enterprise. We actually didn't talk about freelance, but I think that if you're not even thinking about a strategy to take, I think winging it is actually worse than going to one of those roles and not liking it, because if you're winging it, you have less of a chance of knowing what you're getting yourself into. If you're strategic about it, you can plan things long term. Like, okay, now that we worked at these really big companies, Pascal, you and I have these things on our resume, right? That was a strategic thing that I thought on my part. I don't know if you did, but knowing this being on my resume, it helps. It really does. Having like a big tech company in your resume is really cool. It's really useful for recruiting and stuff because people come out of IBM, they're extremely talented and they go all sorts of companies, Google, Facebook, Apple, whatever. But and they even start their own things. But if you're just not thinking about this and you're aimlessly wandering the earth, maybe that's how you prefer to live. I'm not gonna tell you how to live, but for me, I want to get to a certain point, and every step closer to that, I'm purposefully putting in front of me.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to look at it because, right, there's no right or wrong if you're going from startup, enterprise, or agency. But if you plan accordingly, those moves can be very successful.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And you can go from enterprise back to agency, and that's okay. But that next agency will no longer be the smaller agency. It's going to be like huge frog or like some of the big names out there because you've gained so much experience from the enterprise world. So when you go into the startup world or agency world,
Or
you're not
vice
positioned
versa.
in the same way. So it's always strategically positioning the next move and so on. And it's okay to move laterally, for a couple, and like there's no right or wrong, but I think having it in that mindset where you're thinking about the future state of things is very important.
Mhm. Oh, yeah. So that kinda concludes the topics of today. Do you wanna go into our product review of the week?
Yeah, I kind of gave my opinion last time on it, and I'd love to get yours on this topic.
So, actually, I don't think we announced yet what the project is that we're going to be launching on the contest, but
No, that's true.
maybe we'll get into that online. So you guys can tune in and follow us to find out more details about that. But the product review of the week is, drum roll, Zoom. Zoom, Google Meet, and Detail, and all those kind of tools that helps you kind of use cameras to
You,
create things, recordings or whatever. I kind of bundled them all together because I kind of feel
yep.
like they're all the same. And I think you said in the past that you have a problem with each one of these things. But let's start with like Zoom and just talk about the Zoom and like all the good things and bad things about Zoom.
I think all products have pros and cons. It's more of like when you require a specific use case for it, like one thing's going to bug you. Like another software, one thing's going to bug you. And I know with Zoom, one thing that you had pointed out, I didn't even notice was like the quality when you record and how it saves. Like it doesn't save in necessarily the assumed area where you thought it would be, where you didn't have to click on settings or so I think there's like that's the thing that bugged us with that part, right? And I could argue that another thing is why make that 45-minute free and like not an hour? Like there's all these little I understand they want to get to the paid version, but like talk about that part where, when you record that quality thing where you assumed it was going to the right place kind of caught us in the behind.
So for those who don't know, Pascal is referring to one of our other episodes where I describe my issue with Zoom trying to set the camera quality to HD on the desktop app, but if you save it to the cloud, you have to go to the website and also click HD there. There's no indication of that.
And
Like,
that's something you learn by doing.
well, yeah, that is something you learn by doing. Practice makes perfect, and I think we've gotten the quality pretty good, but it's frustrating because Zoom doesn't care enough about the customer. Maybe they do, like, I talked about the customer support situation that I had with Zoom. Maybe they do care, like they do truly care. They are made up of people, but it doesn't feel like they care. And that's what I think matters a lot because you can tell people you care so much, but if you don't actually put that to action and make take the necessary steps to care, then you clearly are just speaking and not, you know, you're talking the talk, not walking the walk. You have to be able to provide that support, to provide that help if you mess up or apologize at the very least. But Zoom didn't even improve over the pandemic. Like it just never got good. It stayed crappy.
Let's say I'll play I played devil's advocate with this one on on the last time we chatted about this company, and I've never worked there, so I'm just saying, could it be that they've grown so much and they tried to cater to everybody's needs, right? If you think of when it started, it was an awesome product, super easy to use, like it was a small, nimble thing because it was one of the most fun one to use at that point. And beginning like 2020, when everybody started work from home a lot, everything just exploded. And like they started adding new features over features over features over features.
Like
Could,
what?
I don't know. Well,
Exactly.
look on
Like
the web. No, but if you look on the
no,
website, it
but what I'm
feels
sa-
like
what I'm saying is that it doesn't feel like they added anything.
I know,
Like
but if you look at
it
the website, it feels like they added a ton.
no, it doesn't. If you can name me a feature that they added that is like substantial, then yeah.
Okay,
But
so
I
the
can't
way
think of
they
one.
what
That's
I
the
wanted to
problem,
say is
right?
like the way they framed the website, it makes it feel like they're trying to cater to everybody that needs to record something online. Should they have focused to strictly meeting? And then you know what I mean? That's where I was getting to is maybe they tried to focus too large, which then when that happens, it's like you're not good at one thing. You're trying to be good at everything, which kind of reflects the opposite. I'm not, I'm not
Just saying like they cared too much.
maybe I'm not I'm not bashing the company. I'm just saying maybe they
I'm
tried to
bashing the
expand.
company.
Maybe maybe they tried to expand too much, and that could be a reason for it. And I'm not an
Okay, fair. That could be a reason, but to be frank, I don't care because there's a million other products out there that are better.
I get it. I totally get
And
it.
if they don't want to get better, that's fine. That's on them. But, unfortunately, they have, like, almost a monopoly on, like,
Mhm.
the industry, like, business, like,
Yeah.
video chat. But, Microsoft Teams came out of nowhere, right? So they've been eating a lot of the market, and, whatever happened to Skype, right? Poor Skype. But, I just have
I
to
forgot
say
about that one. Oh my god.
there was, like, Uvu, right? That was
Yeah,
another
yeah, yeah,
one.
yeah.
All these crazy, experiments of the
Yeah.
past, and Skype's still around. I don't know why they haven't, like, been promoting it a lot, but, you know, it's to me, it's just sad to watch a product that had a lot of potential
Mhm.
fall flat,
I know.
and whatever the reason is, I'm sure there is a logical reason why they haven't improved. They simply didn't, and I think a cop out for improving is by opening up your product to a marketplace to, like, add other apps and features that you can't figure out how to add. I think it's in some cases a really good thing because you have innovation. But if those like basic things, like I know Webflow was experiencing this recently, where those who don't know, Webflow is a tool that lets you build a website similar to Framer, but honestly not as nice. Still kind of have to learn a little bit of HTML, CSS, and kind of keep that in mind when you're building it. But it's still kind of a visual builder, so anyone who
Mhm.
doesn't know how to code can still build a website. It's still a pretty good tool. Highly recommend check it out. Where's our sponsor, Webflow? But Webflow, maybe they won't sponsor us. They're not gonna sponsor us after I say this. There's, like, a feature where you have to, like, I guess, reorder things, like, reorder a list of things, and you have to install an app to allow you to drag and drop to reorder a list. And that, like, really irks me. Like, if a product can't build basic functionality, then they rely on a marketplace to do that, a couple things happen, but we'll get into that in
Figma
another
does this
episode.
too.
Yeah, Figma does it too.
It's
All these
annoying.
platforms do it.
You always have to go to the community to figure out, like, even if you want to copy and paste from Figma to Framer,
Mhm.
you need the plugin to do it, and then you copy it.
I wanna talk about platforms in another episode because I think that that is, like, a huge issue, right? Being, like, the marketplace and, like, the void of, like, features that should exist but don't. But we'll leave that for another time. So why don't you start start up this rapid fire so we can wrap up the pod.
Rapid fire. Those are always your favorite, right?
No, they're my least favorite.
Haha. All right. You ready?
Sure. I'm, like, literally, like, not I don't even wanna do these rapid fire. Okay, go.
Okay. Chocolate or vanilla?
Chocolate.
Really?
Why? Of course.
Okay. What's in your last Google search?
My Google search is kind of off, like, the
Oh,
history is
that's
off
true.
because
You're
because
smart.
well, we had to do that at some point.
Okay.
It makes it more private, so
Okay. What was your worst subject in school?
my worst subject?
Yeah.
Reading. I can barely read. I have, like, a 5th grade reading level.
Really?
Absolutely, I think
That's
it
why
has
you
to do
paint.
with, like
That's why you paint by numbers?
That's why I can only count to 7. No, it's because I think I have, like, a dyslexia of some sort where I can't read, like, a full paragraph without, like, mixing up the words, the letters in between, whatever. I don't
Okay.
know, it slows me down, I'm like, "Oh my god." So I just hate reading, so I just stopped getting good at it and just did other things to compensate.
That's okay. Summer or winter?
Oh, summer.
See, well, you're from Florida.
Well, why would you want your car to get stuck in snow? Like, what purpose does that serve? It's nice to look at. Snow's nice, but I'd rather be on a beach
I'm
in
from
my
Canada,
bathing
so for
suit.
me, it's like I'm not in the same place as you. Talking to beach, if you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
I haven't explored the world enough to know where to live, but it has to be with a beach or a lake or some sort of like body of water.
Favorite hobby?
Can't say design because also work, right? I think part of the problem last year was that I couldn't figure out what to do as a hobby, and my hobby was just doing more work. So I think this year I want to kind of spread a little bit out of digital stuff
Yeah,
and do more hardware stuff. That's something
cool.
I'm really interested in doing, building like hardware and like experimenting.
Very cool.
But
Okay.
if I did have to say, actually, you know what? I do have a hobby. It's training my dog, doing like a lot of dog tricks with him. I do
Cool.
like some serious dog training with him. Hopefully, I can like enter him into like a competition.
We'll create an Instagram for him.
He already has one.
Oh, of course he does. Yeah. Okay, best fashion advice you've ever received? That's such a weird one, I know, but I had to ask.
My sister says she doesn't like it when I wear more than two colors. So if I wear three colors, she gets mad at me. Like, take off one of the colors because it's just too much. Like if I have
Oh,
like a brown jacket with like a black shirt and white pants, she'll freak out or something like that.
okay. What's your nickname? Do you have
My
one?
nickname,
Yeah, do you have one?
Mitch.
That's a boring nickname.
Well, that's my nickname, so take it or leave it.
Okay, last one. On a scale of 1 to 10, how good are you as a designer?
Oh, I thought that question was on a scale of 1 to 10, period. I was like, 8?
Fantastic.
Scale of 1 to 10, how good am I like, to rate myself?
Yeah,
Well, I can't give myself a perfect score because I don't think that means that I wouldn't have anything to improve. So I would say definitely
exactly.
like an 8.
That's what I wanted you to say because nobody can be a 10. That means they don't have nothing to learn.
I think that, if anyone says 10, they need to set a new scale because
Yeah,
they maybe reached their metric of success. That's fine. I haven't reached mine yet, and I know what it kind of looks like, but, I think that if you can't articulate it, you definitely can't figure out how to measure it, and if
you,
you can't measure it, you can't define if you're gonna be successful or not. So, yeah.
metrics is a good way to frame it.
Hell yeah.
Thanks, Mitch. Thanks for another fun episode.
Woo! I'll see you in the next one.
Awesome. Thanks, man.